So today joining us is a highly experienced and passionate doctor. He is who working at as a ENT consultant and head of department of ENT at BGC Global Hospital. He's an endoscopic skull-based surgeon at HCG Bangalore, ENT consultant and head of department of ENT at Saga Hospital, and also he's a health consultant at one of the most highly renowned institutes in India of management, IIM Bangalore. So we highly welcome you, sir. It'll be grateful for us to know what inputs we can have. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
Divya. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir, for joining today, sir. As we would like to tell our audience first, they are free to, post their questions or any kind of query in the chat box, and we'll definitely pick them up. Apart from these, we got some certain set of questions, about different aspects of ENT. Those include sleeping disorders, tonsillitis, ENT, like cleaning habits, and we'll quickly go one by one from each topic to other. So starting with sleeping apnea and sleeping disorders, so the most common question there was, why do people snore? Like, what's the principle behind it? Why is it happening? Normally people won't snore, but while sleeping they'll be the loudest one. So what's the reason behind that?
So most common causes for a person to snore is basically once the nose gets blocked. So if at all the nose gets blocked, then they can't breathe through the nose. So they'll have to open up their mouth. So when they open the mouth, the tongue which is there, tongue doesn't have a bone. So it kind of slips back. And once that slips back, you'll tend to snore. And you would have observed people who snore are usually extremely obese. People who are fat, they tend to snore loud and extremely loud. And snoring is not a good sign because it has multiple other issues. Like, snoring causes people to have uncontrolled diabetes. People will have issues of hypertension. It'll also lead to sudden death. So snoring is not just limited to adults, even children snore. And that is basically because of the adenoid hypertrophy or the third tonsil, which is in the back of the nose. So that causes a nose block and that causes snoring. So people assume that, we should not go for surgery. We should not approach a doctor. Snoring is fine. People are deep sleepers. That one, this one. No, that's not true. Any kind of snoring is bad. So kindly consult a ENT doctor and assess why exactly are they snoring.
So you mentioned any kind of snoring is bad and we need surgery for that. Can you explain to our viewers like how is it bad? Like what are the adverse effects of snoring and what are the like? Is there only surgery cure option or there are other possible options also?
So as I had mentioned, snoring is bad because it basically impedes the growth of, if it's a kid, it impedes the growth. If it's an adult, it leads to more amount of stress hormone secretions. That's the corticosteroids or the normal steroids in the body. So as and when the steroid levels increase in the body, it will increase the chances of the person developing diabetes, the person developing hypertension, the person developing other sorts of heart-related issues, lung-related issues. So these two, just the diabetes and hypertension, are more than sufficient to cause a various amount of bodily complications. And many of the time, doctors would be giving a patient anti-diabetic medication and anti-hypertensive medications, but it doesn't work because the patient is snoring. So the whole issue of the patient developing snoring and developing these two kind of complications are essential to no, it's very, very vital that they don't snore. So when I mentioned that we need to assess, I mentioned we need to assess why is there snoring. I didn't say surgery is the main treatment. I told we need to first assess what is the cause for snoring. So snoring can be because of three basic causes. One is the nose, One is behind the other one is behind the nose. One is the oral cavity. Another one is the hypopharynx or the airway below. So if at all there's any obstruction in any of those four areas, it can lead to snoring. So if at all there's any issues in the nose, especially nose and in the back of the nose, that can be addressed by, if at all they have allergies, we need to reduce the allergies. If at all they have a bent nose, the bent nose can't be corrected with medication, so the bent septum has to be corrected. If there's polyposis, we have to remove the polyps and also give them steroids to ensure that there's no recurrence. If there's anything behind the nose, we need to ensure why exactly there's a collapse there. So all those things we need to assess. Non-surgically, there are other things which can be useful, like the BiPAP machine, which goes onto the face and then gives some positive airway pressure. But also need to understand that that can be utilized if there is a normal airway. If there is an airway obstruction, unfortunately, we need to go for surgery. If there's no airway obstruction, we can use the mask and that will reduce the snoring. The main treatment for snoring is weight loss. If you lose weight by even 5 kgs, the snoring will reduce by 30%. That's provided if the patient is extremely obese.
Okay, that's a nice start for us. 32, 5 kg weight. That's nice. Okay, so moving on to next question about sleeping. Usually people with sleeping disorder have this myth or this, belief that it is because of stress or, they are tense about their lifestyle and all that. But sometimes there are other reasons, especially with related to ENT. There are so many other reasons that people are unaware of. Can you, shed some light over that?
So as I mentioned, we need to assess what exactly is the cause for this kind of snoring. So if it is a nasal cause, if it's a nasopharyngeal cause, or behind the nose cause, oral cause. So when we come to the oral cavity, enlarged tonsils can be another cause for obstruction. If there is any kind of an acid reflux, stomach acid coming up to the throat and causing choking sensation, that is also kind of snoring. If there is any kind of thickness of or the goiter, or when the thyroid is enlarged, that can also cause snoring. Main causes for snoring is the double chin. Basically, people who have double chin, they tend to snore more. Why is that? So when you lie down, the chin will push your tongue back. The fat part of fat will push your tongue back, and it will cause a tongue fall back. That's one of the major causes for snoring. So all these various parameters are a few causes. Like as I mentioned, like in the nose is the main major cause for snoring. So once we figure out if there is any kind of allergy, we treat the allergy, the nose block will reduce and the snoring will improve because the patient will be breathing through the nose and not through the mouth.
Okay, thank you so much, doctor. One more small question. Any specific timing or specific duration after which a patient should consult the ENT specialist, or like as soon as they find out they are snoring in the night, should they immediately go to the doctor?
It's usually better because you don't want to unnecessarily develop diabetes or hypertension before you go and approach your ENT doc. So before the onset of any kind of comorbidity like diabetes, hypertension, heart issues, lung issues, better to go and consult such that you will be preventing the further complications.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much. I think this was from the set of sleeping disorder questions. Next, I'll move on to motion sickness. It's also a common, disorder that people are unaware of, and they just are full of myths and false beliefs. So, again, what causes motion sickness? What causes motion sickness, and why is it so variable? And different patients have different kind of order, like levels of like someone would even traveling for 1 kilometer in a car, they'll start puking and all, and someone would like if they're traveling in a bus or then only they'll have different symptoms. So what's the difference here and why is it caused?
So motion sickness has two components. One is a psychological component, another one is the pathological component. So let's first talk about the pathological component. So the balance center of the ear has two functions. One is hearing, which everyone will know automatically. The other one is the balance center. So the balance of a person's body is based inside the ear. So the inner part of the ear has two components. The one is the cochlea and other one is the vestibule and the semicircular canals. So the semicircular canals and the other balance centers which is there inside the ear, that has small crystals inside the ear which tend to move. So when you're traveling, the body is not moving fully, just that you're moving, the bus or the car or some other vehicle is moving. So you're in a stationary position. So what happens, and also it's in a confined space. So motion sickness usually occurs in places which is usually confined. Either in most first motion sickness usually used to occur in the sea, because people used to travel in the sea, and sea there is waveardly motions with the waves, they move up and down. Because of the waves moving up and down, your body tries to compensate. So when there is compensation occurring, the balance centers try to overcompensate. Usually when there is some amount of overstimulation, there's a chances of people to develop vertigo, or that's dizziness, blackouts, and also vomiting. So the vomiting occurs because of parasympathetic stimulation. So people sweat, they vomit, they have diarrhea, they have other issues. Their heartbeats tend to go low and all those things. So this is a protective mechanism. Basically, they want the body to calm down, not freak out. So that's why the parasympathetic stimulation gets into overdrive. So that leads to this kind of vomiting sensation. But that being said, once people have experienced this kind of issue, when they have this dizziness, vomiting, and all those things, that plays in their mind. So most often patients who have imbalance and other issues, they have 50 to 60% of them have psychological component into it. So that component is the major cause why everything is, it's kind of varied with person to person. And also you need to understand the anatomy of a person, and anatomy and physiology of a person is varied from one person to another. So you can't expect the same kind of experience across.
Okay. Uh, so, sir, is there like a common off-the-counter medicine that people can take while traveling, like just pop up a pill and have a relaxed travel or something like that? Or
See, it's better. You can't have one blanket treatment for all. As I mentioned, each individual person has different kind of anatomy and physiology. So one medication will work for one person, but you can't, individualize, and you can't have a blanket treatment. You need to have personalized treatment. So it's better that you consult any doctor before you pop any pill. For remedy purposes, you can keep the windows open. Okay. Other one is to not panic. So if at all you're panicking, take a paper bag and breathe and breathe. That's the best thing which you can do as a remedy. So if you reduce your panic, the chances of you puking and doing any kind of other issues which are associated with motion sickness will definitely reduce.
okay. So there was a question that can sleeping while traveling help with motion sickness, or it will like what's the effect of sleeping while traveling?
Well, when you're sleeping, you're obviously calming yourself down.
Okay.
You're not keeping your eyes open. When you're keeping your eyes open, you're trying to move your eyes very frequently. So that kind of increases the chances of you panicking more and you having more amount of motion sickness issues. So calming yourself down, sleeping will definitely help.
Okay. Also, is there any permanent treatment for this, or just like medication is the only possible cure right now?
So it depends on what kind of vertigo or a dizziness this person is having. So it's in depending on if at all there's any kind of a pathological component which is exceeding normalcy, that we might have to we have various options, medications or intratympanic. That's through the eardrum we can give an injection and we can reduce it. Or in a worst basis, we'll have to sacrifice the hearing and the balance both, and then suppress the vertigo. So
Okay.
it's very kind of a approach.
Okay. This was from the motion sickness component of today's discussion, and now I'll hand over Disha to continue and pick up the next topic and ask questions for that.
So there is a question we are getting is that are there any simple remedies to overcome motion sickness?
So simple remedies, as I mentioned, if you can calm yourself down, paper bag, and taking that, consult your doctor before you, if at all the motion sickness
Okay.
is extremely severe, and also sleeping while traveling. That kind of helps a lot.
Okay, thank you, Doctor. So next set of questions are from hearing and myth. Since it's a very common problem in India, so what are the early symptoms and how we can look for, like, when to look for a doctor and what are those kind of issues when it comes?
So usually the hearing screening is usually done before a person gets into a job. Along with the annual health checkup, there is also a hearing screening which is being done. So
Okay.
annually, if you can check your hearing, that will be great. That is the most common thing. And you can also have an assessment of what exactly is. So how you're asking me, when will a person know that the patient or the person is having a hearing difficulty?
Yeah.
So most common thing is when you're having a conversation. If one tends to ask or one tends to miss a few words when a person is talking, that's a very common sign. Now, most common thing when even a family member is with you and the family member doesn't know that he or she has hearing loss is when you are watching TV along with them. They tend to increase the volume of the TV. Other most common thing is when talking on phone, the person on the other side, even in a very calm, peaceful environment, if you're talking in a normal voice and the person is not able to hear, that's another sign of a hearing loss. So all these put together are most common features or use cases where you can understand that these are people who are having high chances of hearing loss.
Okay. So ringing is a common issue, especially in old age. So
Yes.
is it like normal or is it an indication of some underlying diseases, like something complicated?
So ringing sensation in the ear is called tinnitus.
Okay.
So tinnitus is a component which is both age related. It can be traumatic noise induced tinnitus. It can be without any real cause. There can be tinnitus. It can be one of the causes of artery inside the brain, which is close to the nerve. If that's pulsating, that can also cause tinnitus. Or it can also be in a very rare state. It can be one of the tumors inside the brain, which is the acoustic schwannoma or vestibular schwannoma. That can be one of the causes for tinnitus. So if there is hearing loss associated with tinnitus, especially in younger people, then we need to assess we need to go for further testing to assess if there is any retrocochlear or behind the this one. What do you say? Behind the hearing center of the ear. If there is any kind of a pathology, we need to assess that by doing various other tests. So all this in a nutshell, if I can say, tinnitus, if there is tinnitus, we need to assess what is the issue for the tinnitus. If that's normal hearing and just tinnitus is there, best way forward is to do some meditation and to ignore the tinnitus. The more we focus on tinnitus, the more worse it's going to get. That's 80% to 90% of the common ringing sensation issues. The other 10% is associated with hearing loss. So when there is hearing loss associated, we need to assess what level of hearing loss is occurring. So tinnitus with hearing loss is usually associated with the sloping high frequency hearing loss. This is usually seen with patients who have old age, patients who have noise trauma, or where they would have heard noise, loud noise, like sudden acoustic trauma. So that can be there. And also the third component is any kind of a tumor inside the brain which can be causing this.
So for like brain tumor, like you have to ultimately go for the surgery.
Yes and no. If it's very small, we can just ignore it. If it is extremely large, like which is not getting controlled by gamma knife or the radiotherapy, then we might have to go for it. So there are three components. If it's very small, we can wait for it to grow further, because usually it takes a long time for it to grow. If at all it is, if it's a sizable chunk, we can give radiotherapy and reduce the size. If it is extremely large, then we can go for surgery.
Okay. So coming about hearing with, like, how can we treat it? So there are multiple options available in the market. Like we have hearing aids and we have cochlear implants. So being a doctor, what you will suggest somebody and why?
So cochlear implant is basically reserved for kids who are born deaf,
Okay.
and hearing aid is for all the people who are older and who are having nerve issues, hearing issues. So hearing also, there are two components. One is the sensory component, one is the conductive component. So if the conductive component means, you do know that the smallest bones in the body is inside the ear. There are the three bones, the incus, malleus, stapes, and incus. So stapes is the smallest bone which is onto the cochlea. The incus is in between the stapes and the malleus. Malleus is on the eardrum. So if at all there's any mechanical issues in the bones, three bones, or in the eardrum, that we have to operate and take out. Correct the issues. Most common causes for hearing loss, conductive hearing loss, is wax. So earwax, if it gets accumulated, that can be one of the main components for decreased hearing. And these comes under the conductive part. The neural part or neural component, for that we need to give hearing aids. Or if the baby is born deaf, that's when we go for cochlear implants. Usually we don't give cochlear implants for elderlies.
Okay. So there is a common myth, or is it true, that hearing loss leads to dementia?
Not necessarily. It's a myth.
Okay. So one thing is there that earwax, it gets accumulated in your ears, it causes deafness. Is it a myth or is it true?
It is true, because it causes mechanical obstruction. So the eardrum, so for the eardrum to vibrate with the with the sound waves. So sound waves have to go and touch the tympanic membrane or the eardrum. If that is obstructed, how do you think the sound waves will go and hit it? So that's why I told it is a most common conductive hearing loss.
Okay, sir. So coming to next set of questions from ear infection.
So if I may add a few things about earwax. So using earbuds,
yes, sir,
most common thing which everyone do a mistake is they use earbuds to clean the wax. Unfortunately, they're not cleaning the wax, they're pushing the wax further in. That what causes impaction of wax, or where it gets solidified and it gets very tight and we can't remove it. And that's what causes hearing loss. So for cleaning of wax, naturally, what do you do? Most of them will ask. Simple, don't do anything. When you're talking, when you're chewing, there's this jawbone which is right in front of the ear. So that will vibrate and it will get out all the wax. So nothing else is extra needed.
That's a very important piece of information. Because
yes. You are muted.
Disha, you are mute. So we have a proper set about cleaning habits for ear, nose, and everything, and we'll be coming to those questions because we know how much wrong people, are putting their efforts in cleaning and actually causing the harm. So I think Disha, you can start with ear infections till then. Yeah.
So, ear infections, what are the different types of ear infections, especially in children?
So in children, so the ear is divided into the outer ear, which is still the eardrum, the middle ear, which is from the eardrum to the cochlea, and the cochlea is the inner ear. So common infections are usually limited to the middle ear and the external ear. So infections which can cause in the external ear are any kind of a fungal infection, any kind of bacterial infection, any kind of wax which gets secondary infected. So putting water into the ear to clean it is one of the most common causes for developing infection. And also secondly, there'll be kind of pimple development, pimples and other furuncles which develop that secondary to the trauma of no putting any kind of a foreign body in the ear. And coming to the middle ear infection, usually it is secondary into any nose infection because there's a tube which connects the nose to the ear. It's called the eustachian tube. So in kids, usually the adenoids, which is in the back of the nose, the third tonsil, that kind of gets blocked. And because of which the eustachian tube opening gets closed and the bacteria from inside the nose goes into the ear. So that kind of causes issues with the middle ear and causes infection in the middle ear. So most common cause is bacterial infection. And beyond that, viral infections are very, very rare. And inner ear
Okay.
infection is also quite rare. So the most common is external ear and the middle ear infections.
Okay, sir. Can like if there is a ear infection, can it leads to other problems if ill treated
Yes.
or if left untreated?
Yes, definitely it will lead to other complications because the ear canal and the middle ear, the roof of it is the skull base, and just above that is the brain. So any kind of a infection can go into, there's a risk of it going into the brain and causing much more havoc in the brain. Other than that,
Okay.
it can also come down into the neck and cause infections here. It can come into the jaw joint, which is right in front of the ear, which I mentioned. That can also get infected and it can cause restriction of mouth opening and other things.
So, what are the common ways, like generally at home, we can ensure that we don't get a ear infection?
Simple thing, ensure that you don't use earbuds and ensure that
Okay.
whenever you have a cold, treat the cold first because the cold is what causes the ear infection.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, I'll be, starting with the nose bleeding question. So, because, nose bleeding is a very, common thing that happens to everyone. And, people don't know how to treat it and people don't know how to, go about it. So, can you explain, start with the reasons why it happened, like why people have nosebleeds time to time?
So nosebleeds can occur because of multiple reasons. So basically, nosebleeds can occur because of, in kids especially, it's because of trauma. They pick their nose with the finger. So traumatic nosebleeds are most common causes. Secondly, there is infection. So any kind of a sinusitis or any rhinitis can increase the vasculature of the mucosa or the inner skin of the nose. So that kind of leads to increased blood flow. So any kind of increased blood flow, the risk of bleeding is higher. The other components of nosebleed are, again, if the kid falls down, then there will be a cut inside, and that is another cause, traumatic nosebleed. This is about kids and for adult. So one common cause for profuse nosebleed, especially in boys, is between maybe 5 to 6 or to about teenage. That is secondary to usually a tumor. So it's called juvenile angiofibroma. It usually occurs in boys and very rarely in girls. So that's about the kids. For adults, it's usually secondary to, again, nose pick infection. And another important cause for the bleeding from the nose is increased BP, sudden BP rise. So you guys would have seen the pressure cooker, right? So the pressure cooker has a valve on top of the thing. So as the pressure increases, the valve just goes up and it will release the pressure so that the pressure cooker doesn't explode. So the same thing happens with the nose. So there are few areas in the nose which are pretty thin, which will open up when there is excessive amount of BP. That is to prevent the from anyone from developing bleed in the brain. So when the pressure increases extremely high, so there's a bleed from the nose. So the main cause for the bleeding is not the nose per se; it's because of the high BP. So ensuring that you control the BP, you will until unless you control the BP, you will be bleeding excessively.
Sir, apart from hypertension, is there any other, particular disease that could be under, like, nose bleeding can have it a symptom, underlying disease, apart from hypertension?
So other than hypertension, as I mentioned, it's again trauma by picking
Okay.
the nose, any kind of accident and fall on the nose. Any infection is another cause for the bleeding, and also any kind of tumor in adults. So any kind of cancer, benign tumor, any kind of polyps which get infected, that can also be one of the causes for the bleeding.
Sir, can you explain the first aid for nose bleeding? Because I think most of the people are unaware about their, first aid, how to go approach, and they might be doing it wrong, which may cause more harm to them. So, can you just, as a doctor, can you give them some
So
first aid for that?
simple thing which most common what I advise for anyone is pinch the nose like this. Pinch the nose tight, bend forward.
Okay, so
Yes.
bending forward and pinching the nose is the
That's the
first aid.
only treatment which is required because you breathe through the mouth, pinch the nose. What happens? The blood clot. Usually, the bleeding occurs from the front of the nose. So when you lie down without doing any kind of thing, the whole blood goes into the stomach, and one doesn't know how much they're bleeding. So they
Okay,
would have lost more than 1 liter, 2 liters of blood without realizing how much they would have bled because it is they're just swallowing it inside and
yeah.
they don't realize how bad or how profuse the bleeding is. So to ensure that you are having a proper what do you say estimate of how much is your bleed, so that's why you need to bend down and pinch the nose. When you pinch the nose, what happens? The blood tends to clot faster,
Okay,
and also you'll be applying pressure on the bleeding vessels. So once you apply pressure on the bleeding vessels, the bleeding will stop very fast. That will take care of the bleeding. Third most important thing which they can do is put an ice pack because ice
yeah.
will reduce the circulation of the blood, and that will be better.
Yeah, I was coming to the ice pack only. So, sir, like, how serious can a nosebleed be, and like how precautious a patient should be, like if he's suffering, like how incidents, how regular, if it's like they're coming, then they should consult a doctor, or like what's the sign for them to go to a doctor for a nosebleed?
So even if there is a mild streak, better to go consult a doctor because we need to assess what is the cause for the streak. Is it an infection or is it anything beyond infection which is causing this kind of a bleed? Usually cancers can also present with just a small streak of blood in the mucosa and the what is the snot which comes out. So the mucus. So it's better to get it assessed than wait for it to subside. This is especially if it's recurring for more than 1 or 2 times. If it's profuse, automatically the patient will tell, no, I have to go to a doctor, and they'll automatically visit the ER.
Even a regular nose picking habit can be, causing nosebleed. So for that also, I think everyone, like the patient, should go to a doctor. And okay, yeah, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so nose picking, it's usually the bleed will not be excessive. But in case some people have a nose pick and there's a pretty gross cut, that will lead to significant amount of bleeding.
Okay, so that was from the nose bleeding section of our agenda. Next, coming to tonsillitis. I think it's a very common. I think as a ENT doctor, you would be seeing it regularly. People coming in for tonsillitis. Before that, I had a small question. Like in this pandemic, as a ENT surgeon, what was the most common case, or what was and most unique? Like two parts of this question. Most common case that you were seeing, like patients coming in for this regularly, and second was what's the most unique or a new kind of a patient like you were seeing for as in pandemic as a ENT surgeon.
Okay, so for the first part, most common thing, patients coming with loss of smell, patients
Okay.
coming with sinusitis post bacterial sinusitis, a highness effect post COVID. These were the two common things. What is the most unique thing and what is the most thing
Like
of
you just find it interesting, like okay, this is
yeah,
new for me,
so
and yeah.
yeah, so nasal miasis. Nasal miasis is the maggots inside the nose.
Okay.
So this was a patient who is I think around 64 or 65-year-old lady. She came to me with the history of maggots in the nose. So it's actually the first case in the whole world which has this kind of a thing. So that's the most unique thing. I've advised her surgery. She has to come back for the surgery. So once I do the surgery and I can prove it that it is from the nose itself, then it will be the world's first case of nasal miasis post-COVID.
Wow, wow, that's amazing. First case in the world. That's amazing. So, sir, coming to tonsillitis, like, can you explain in a simple language to our viewers, like, what is tonsillitis and why do people like they get tonsils so regularly? I've seen people getting tonsils every second week, and they are just, panicking about everything they eat, everything they drink, and all those things are in their mind all the time. So, can you just, give us an idea about that?
So tonsils are basically lymphoid tissue which is there in the oral cavity. It's a encapsulated lymphoid tissue. That's why you can see it right in the entrance of the upper part of the oral cavity or the starting part of the airway and the GI tract. So basically, you are having this tonsils to prevent infection because whatever you eat, whatever you breathe has germs in it. So these take in the germs and they fight it and they give the immunity to the body. So this is pretty essential for kids, especially when they're less than 7 years of age, because the other lymphoid tissues in the gut won't have established as such right now. So this kind of is very important component for the pediatric age group. But so that's the reason why this tonsils gets inflamed very frequently. Why does the tonsil get inflamed very frequently? Is because the tonsil is not like a it's not a smooth thing. It has crypts like this. So so it's like you have open fingers. So it has crypts which goes with various indulations. Yes. So food particles go inside the crypt and it gets stored there, and that's when the bacteria will increase in number, and that's when the body also mounts its defense. But unfortunately, for some people, the crypts are so big that it goes and gets lodged inside, and it kind of the bacteria grows excessively. So that's the reason why some people keep getting recurrent tonsillitis. So the thumb rule for doing any patients who needs a surgery for tonsils are if they are having recurrent tonsillitis of more than 2 to 3 times in a year. When I say tonsillitis, they need to have severe pain. They need to have fever. They need to have they should have taken leave of work or of school. So if it's recurring for more than 3 or 4 times in a year, then that's mandates a tonsillectomy, because that means that the patient has reactive tonsils and that needs to be removed. Once the patient and the tonsils are removed, the other components which can take care of the lymphoid, other lymphoid tissue which is there in the body, which will take care of the same function of tonsil. For kids, we usually tend to not do a tonsillectomy till 7 years of age, because by then the other lymphoid tissue would have grown. But in case the kid has recurrent tonsillitis and that is kind of leading to airway obstruction and other issues, we have to do the tonsillectomy before the 7 years of age. That's basically to prevent any kind of risk of other risks which are associated with tonsillitis.
So, sir, is there like surgery the only approach if the tonsils have become worse, or there are like home like regular practices that patient can pick up so that at least they can control the amount of
So
infection they are getting?
the most common household remedy is just saltwater gargling.
Okay.
Plain
So,
high concentration saltwater gargling, especially if there is acute infection, it will reduce. Even for chronic infection, also the sizes of the tonsil and the chances of them getting bacterial infection will reduce. So simple, plain saltwater gargling is more than sufficient.
okay, keeping a good oral hygiene and all these
That's
stuff.
given.
That's it. Okay. So is it like tonsillitis is more common in children, or is it like same in adults as well as children, or like what's the ratio there?
So in kids, it's definitely more, because as I mentioned, tonsils are the primary lymphoid tissues in the oral cavity and in the upper airway. So that's why it's more in kids than compared to adults. In adults, because there is more other lymphoid tissues which are there, which can take care of its function, the chances of them developing recurrent tonsillitis is lesser.
Okay. So for our viewers who don't know what's a lymphoid organ is basically a infection fighting organ in your body, and its inflammation or its symptoms are basically showing that you are having an infection and it's fighting against it. So thank you, doctor, for the tonsillitis part. Now let's quickly move on to the cleaning habits first, because I think people are asking questions about those. So coming to ear cleaning habits, so like, can you explain like how the ear the to picks like the cotton picks that we have, it's so wrong and are actually causing more harm to us, and what are the correct procedure to clean the ears?
So the most common mistake which everyone does is using earbuds for cleaning the ear. So the issue with earbuds is that it doesn't clean the ear per se as such. It will push the debris. The wax is nothing but a mixture of oily substance which the body secretes in the ear called cerumen, along with the dead skin and hair and external debris, dust. So it's a full combination of all of these things. So people, if they are using earbuds, it's not going to help them in any which ways. It's just going to worsen the matter. The natural way of cleaning the ear is by just chewing when you're eating, when you're talking. That will vibrate the joint in front of the ear. That will transmit the vibration. And since ear canal is on as a end cavity, it's a blind pouch. While it causes resonance, and the only way out is externally. It can't go internally. So that's the best way to treat or
Okay.
clean the ear.
Okay. So how regular like people should be like checking their ears, or like how regular should be the cleaning part? Like, should they go to a professional from time to time for getting, because I have seen like they have started a in hospitals they'll have a proper setup for proper cleaning of ears. So should they be going there time to time, or just home regular cleaning is sufficient?
So you eating food, you talking is more than sufficient for cleaning the ear. You have to go visit a doctor only in case you are having any kind of symptoms like pain or blockage of ear or any other symptoms. That's when you'll have to go. Otherwise, it's not required. And other component for blocked ear sensation is not the wax per se, as such, it's the nose. So the nose, behind the nose, the eustachian tube, if at all it gets blocked, that will cause this blocked ear sensation.
So coming to the nose cleaning part, so I have seen many people have started buying these nose hair trimmers and all these fancy stuffs. Are they safe? Are they good to use, or should we like not promote these instruments?
Well, so if you are using the nasal trimmer, so nasal hair is basically there for a physiological cause. It basically is useful for preventing the entry of big dust particles into the airway. If you're going to trim it off and you're going to increase the chances of the dust going down into the lower airway. And also people who are having asthma, that if they trim the hair, the chances of them developing excessive amount of asthma is higher. So, and other component of trimming the hair or side effect of trimming the hair is development of a pimple in the nose. And unfortunately, this area, the upper lip and the nose,
Thanks.
is called, yeah, that's called the danger area of the face. So why is it called the danger area of the face? Is because that is directly connected to the brain. There's a vein which connects directly to the brain. Any kind of an infection here in this area can directly lead to an infection in the brain and cause more complications. So better to not, even if you want to trim it just for the cosmetic purposes, ensure that you trim it very, very vigilantly and carefully with proper lighting, and ensure that you are if at all there's any kind of infection or any development of any pimple, ensure that you can consult a doctor at the earliest.
Okay, so one more quick question I had, that when people go into a swimming pool or like they take bath in a large water body, they tend to put cotton plugs in their nose or in ears. Like, should we do that, or like keeping them open is safe, or like what's your recommendation about that?
So so if at all the person is having a risk of ear infection, if the person had previous infections of the ear, better to use a silicone ear plugs. So you get silicone ear plugs, which is much more moldable, much more softer, and they don't cause trauma to the ear. Those are recommended. Using cotton, plain cotton, will cause more amount of absorption of water into the ear, and that causes more harm. So better to avoid cotton per se as such. And I don't know if anyone has used put cotton to the nose for preventing any kind of water entering the nose, because you'll be breathing and water will come out eventually. So yes, for the ear per se as such, if at all they have any risk of developing ear infection or previously had ear infections, they can go for a earplug.
Okay, thank you so much, doctor, for this. Now, next topic we have sinus infection, which Disha, you can take over.
Yeah. So sinus infections are like the most common infection, in fact, all around the world, right? So what are the early symptoms a person can look for and visit the doctor?
So sinusitis, basically the most common presentation is heaviness of head. When they move the head forward, backward, they feel that it's pretty heavy, and also above the eye, they feel that heaviness is there. Below the eyes, the heaviness is there. Few people are presented with pain in the neck and all these things, back of the head and pain in the neck. So most common presentation also is nose block. They feel that the nose is stuffy all the time. So that's when they need to come and check with the doctor. So we need to assess what is the cause for this kind of a blockage. Is it a bent septum, the central bone of the nose? Is that a cause, which is most commonly seen in most of the patients? 90% of the patients have a bent septum. And other common causes are other, if there is any allergy. Patients who are having high amount of allergies do tend to have this kind of sinusitis. So sinusitis occurs secondary to allergy, because the allergy will increase the secretions inside the sinuses. So if at all the sinus gets blocked, that gets secondarily infected, and that was what is causing sinusitis.
Okay, so is it genetic? Like if my parents have it, is this probable that I'll also have it?
Yes, allergy is definitely a hereditary factor, so it is
Okay.
associated with genetics. Yes.
Uh, so how swear, like if it gets swear, so can it go untreated? Like if it go, yeah, I mean, if it go untreated, can it get swear?
I didn't understand. Can you go?
Like if it gets swear, like if it gets untreated for a longer period of time.
If it gets
So
severe, is it?
yeah,
Okay. So yeah, so if at all it is severe, then again it causes complications. So if at all there's, because see the eye is the one which is surrounded with all sorts of sinuses. So there are four pairs of sinuses: the frontal sinus, which is above the eyes; the maxillary sinus, which is below the eyes; the ethmoidal sinus, which is in between the eyes; and the sphenoid sinus, which is in the center behind the eye. So all of these are surrounding the eye, and you would have heard the black fungus, which is the nothing but the
yeah, yeah,
mucormycosis, the fungal infection, which is common
common
right
one.
now. So what
Yes, yes.
happens with that? It goes into the eyes, it goes into the brain. So that's the main issues. So it will go into the eyes. It will, you know, if at all it's involving excessive amount of the eye tissue, then we'll have to remove the eye. If it's gone into the brain, it's at the point of no return, especially if it's a fungal infection.
Okay, it can go to that swear, like
Yes, severity is high.
okay. So, so like there are since sinus is so common, so we have these home remedies and we have this high treatments, like when we go for pharmaceutical background or pharmaceutical medicine. So, what do you suggest to the people? Like,
Again, pharmacists are not doctors. They are
okay,
only they are only there to dispense medicines. They can't prescribe medicines because they are not qualified for it. That's the problem with India.
yeah,
People
that's
go and ask over the counter, they'll take any kind of drug, be it steroids, be it antibiotics, be it any XYZ drug. That's the major issue. So it's always better that you consult, because as I mentioned, there'll be so many issues. Without assessing, we can't give a straightforward treatment, because medicine is personalized. You can't have a blanket treatment for all.
okay. So, what are the like common practices or common habits that we can like take and prevent this?
So, most common thing which home remedies or preventive medicine, what can be done or practice at home, is doing pranayama.
Okay.
The regular pranayama, which is there, yogasana. If you can do it, well and good, because it will increase the circulation of the air into the nasal cavities, and that will prevent. It will give better clearance of the sinuses. Other thing is doing mild amount of stimulation, not excessive, mild, less than 1 minute of stimulation. If at
Mild
all you're
amount
having
of?
steam
Okay.
inhalation, boil the water, plain water. Don't add anything. No Vicks, no Amrutanjan, no vaporizers, nothing. Plain water. Just do steam inhalation for a minute. If at all you are having stuffy nose, if there's no stuffy nose, nothing else is required.
So like pranayams and steam inhalations, these are the
Pranayama,
like.
pranayama for normal people and also for people who have sinusitis. Steam inhalation is only for people who have stuffy nose or sinusitis.
Okay. So, sir, moving to next set of topic is seasonal allergies. So, since we have this kind of environment and the environment is changing, climate is changing. So, what are the common symptoms of allergies, and what are the common set of allergies associated with?
So, common symptoms of allergic rhinitis, if we are talking about specifically nose-related allergies, then it
Okay.
is basically sneezing. People have sneezing, running nose, nose block. These are the common things. And secondary to this, that will get infected, and people will develop infection, headache, fever, and other things. So you would be asking why it is more common in seasons. So
Yeah.
seasonal allergic rhinitis is basically because of the release of pollens from various flowers. plants flower in particular seasons. So people who are having seasonal allergies are usually secondary to having pollen allergy. And because it is the Bangalore is the pollen capital of India, if not the world. That's why people in Bangalore tend to have excessive amount of allergies. I have had patients coming to me saying that they have been outside India and just in North India or in the coastal areas, or even in the colder countries like US and Europe. They mentioned that the moment they step in India, they land in India, they develop all sorts of allergies. So, well, that's because of the basic pollen issues.
So, like, how we can limit the exposure of it?
Well,
Any physical or any
physically you
medical?
can limit it by wearing a mask. COVID has taught
Okay.
people how to wear a mask.
Yeah, that's
So
very true.
that's the only preventive measure. Other preventive measure is to have honey, the raw honey, not the one which you
Okay.
get in supermarkets. The honey which you get it from the honeycomb. Why honeycomb? Preferably from somewhere near your house, because the honeybees collect the pollen and they collect the honey, and in the process they also collect a little bit of pollen, then put it into the honey. So it causes some amount of what do you say, desensitization. So that will lead to patients developing decreased reaction to decreased allergic reactions.
Okay. So, like, so what is the difference between common cold and these allergies? Like,
So common cold is basically a viral infection.
yeah.
So common cold viruses also unfortunately include coronaviruses, rhinoviruses, adenoviruses. So these are three are the most common viruses which cause common cold. And so common cold usually presents with stuffy nose, same running nose, and heaviness of head, which is also similar to allergic rhinitis. Only an additional component for common cold is fever. So people tend to have fever or feverish symptoms. Allergic patients don't have this fever component.
Okay. So, what as like individual we can do to treat these symptoms?
So treatment of symptoms, you need to check what is the cause, what is the trigger. Allergy is basically a
Okay.
trigger reaction. So avoid the trigger and you'll be fine. But unfortunately, there will be so many components into the trigger, we won't know what exactly is causing the trigger. So it is sometimes people who have develop allergic reactions secondary to having some kind of food or going to a particular place or using a particular clothing or meeting someone. So they have to do the trial and error method to understand and titrate which is the cause for their trigger and avoid the trigger. That's the best thing that they can do. If at all they can't do that, then they have to resort to medications.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much, doctor. Thank you so much for joining us and, on a Sunday and, helping and giving us so much information. I think we tried to cover every aspect of ENT, and these were very basic questions that people aren't aware of. And I think with, this particular video that for our audience, I would like to tell you it's available on our Facebook, it's available on our Instagram, it's available on our YouTube. It would be uploaded soon this week, and you can definitely share with your friends. And this Health Jankari platform, which has amazing doctors like Dr. Prashant we had today, who are coming up giving their time to help out people, provide this basic set of information that normal doctor people are afraid, or like they're not comfortable asking, or they're it's time is not there to ask a doctor in a regular visit. So these kind of sessions are what are helping to educate us and having a better healthcare. So thank you so much, doctor, and I hope you had a great experience today with us. And
Yes.
thank you so much everyone for tuning in, and make sure you share with your friends, family, and anyone you feel that they need to be educated. Thank you so much for everyone's support, and with this I would like to end today's session. See you next week. Every Sunday we have amazing sessions like these only on Health Jankari. Thank you so much everyone.
Thank you.